The early evening rain had finally subsided, leaving the streets of downtown Los Angeles glistening under the warm glow of street lamps. Rivulets of water still streamed down the large windows of Lumiere, one of the city's most talked-about new restaurants, casting dancing patterns of light across its sleek interior. Despite being open for only 6 months, the modern French bistro had quickly garnered critical acclaim, not just for its innovative cuisine, but for its understated elegance that managed to feel both exclusive and welcoming. What few patrons knew was that Lumiere was partially owned by Keanu Reeves, who had quietly partnered with his longtime friend and acclaimed chef Marc Bouchard to bring the restaurant to life. Keanu's involvement had been deliberately kept out of the press releases and marketing materials. His contribution was financial backing and occasional input on the ambiance and hospitality philosophy, while Mark handled the culinary vision and day-to-day operations. On this particular Tuesday evening, Keanu approached the restaurant from the back alley, using the staff entrance as he often did when visiting. He preferred to observe the establishment in its natural state, rather than creating the stir his presence might cause among diners. Dressed in simple dark jeans, a black button-up shirt, and a well-worn leather jacket, with his hair slightly damp from the rain, he looked more like a motorcycle enthusiast stopping in for dinner than one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars. The rear entrance led through a short hallway past the office and directly into the kitchen, a gleaming expanse of stainless steel where Mark's team executed their culinary choreography with practiced precision. Normally, Keanu would pause here to observe the kitchen operations and exchange a quick word with Mark if he was at the pass. Tonight, however, the executive chef was attending a culinary conference in New York, leaving his capable sous chef, Alicia, in charge. Keanu nodded a quiet greeting to a few staff members who recognized him, then slipped through the swinging door that connected the kitchen to the dining room. He planned to sit at the small bar that overlooked the open kitchen, a spot that allowed him to observe both the culinary team and the front-of-house operations without drawing attention. But as he emerged into the narrow service corridor between the kitchen and dining room, he froze. From around the corner, just out of sight, came the unmistakable sound of someone crying, muffled sobs punctuated by shaky breaths that suggested whoever was crying was trying desperately not to be heard. Keanu hesitated, uncomfortable at having stumbled upon such a private moment. He was about to retreat back to the kitchen when he heard another voice, low, aggressive, and immediately concerning. "You need to pull yourself together right now," a man was saying, his tone cold and dismissive. "This is a professional establishment, not your personal therapy session. If you can't handle the pace, perhaps you should find employment more suited to your fragile temperament." "I'm sorry, Mr. Hargrove," came a female voice, thick with tears but clearly making an effort to regain composure. "It won't happen again. Today has been." "I don't care what today has been," the man, evidently Mr. Hargrove, cut her off. "Leave your personal problems at the door off. That's what professionals do. One more incident like this, and I'll have to reconsider your position here." Something in the exchange stirred a protective instinct in Keanu. While he wasn't involved in hiring staff or managing personnel, those responsibilities fell to Mark and the restaurant manager, Daniel Hargrove. He had been explicit about creating a workplace culture of respect and dignity when he and Mark had developed the concept for Lumiere. Before he could decide whether to intervene, he heard footsteps approaching, and Daniel Hargrove rounded the corner. The restaurant manager, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with a Lumiere pin on his lapel, stopped short at the sight of Keanu. "Mr. Reeves," he said, quickly composing his surprise into a professional smile. "We weren't expecting you this evening. Mark mentioned you might stop by later this week." "I was in the neighborhood," Keanu replied simply, studying Hargrove's face. The manager was relatively new, having joined the team about 2 months ago when the previous manager relocated to Chicago. Mark had spoken highly of his experience and efficiency, though Keanu had only met him briefly during the hiring process. "Of course. Would you like your usual table? I can have it prepared immediately," Hargrove offered, his demeanor shifting seamlessly into polished hospitality mode. "Actually," Keanu said, his voice quiet but direct, I'm more interested in making sure your staff is all right. I couldn't help overhearing. Hargrove's expression tightened almost imperceptibly before he offered a dismissive wave. Just a minor personnel issue. One of our newer servers is having trouble maintaining professional boundaries. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. Before Keanu could respond, a young woman emerged from the same corner Hargrove had come from. Her server's uniform was immaculate, a crisp white shirt under a black waistcoat with the Lumiere logo subtly embroidered on the breast pocket, but her eyes were red-rimmed, and a flush of embarrassment colored her cheeks when she saw Keanu standing there. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, not quite meeting either man's eyes. "I'll get back to my section immediately, Mr. Hargrove." "Olivia," Hargrove said, his tone carrying a warning. "Mr. Reeves is here. Please ensure Table 7 receives exceptional attention tonight." "Yes, sir," she nodded, finally glancing briefly at Keanu before hurrying past both men toward the dining room. There was something in that fleeting look, a mixture of embarrassment, resignation, and what Keanu could only describe as wounded dignity, that resonated deeply with him. He'd encountered enough artificial smiles in Hollywood to recognize the difference between performance and authentic emotion. "I think I'll sit at the bar tonight," Keanu told Hargrove, his tone making it clear the conversation about the server wasn't finished. "And I'd appreciate it if you could join me after the dinner service slows down. There are some aspects of Lumiere's operation I'd like to discuss." Hargrove's smile remained fixed, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. Anything you need." As Keanu made his way to the bar, he couldn't shake the image of Olivia's face or the sound of her muffled tears. While he generally preferred to maintain a hands-off approach to the business, allowing Mark and the management team to handle day-to-day operations, something about this situation felt like it required his attention. He settled onto a bar stool, ordered a sparkling water from the bartender, and began to observe the restaurant's rhythm with new awareness, particularly focusing on the interactions between staff and management. From his vantage point at the bar, Keanu had a clear view of both the dining room and the service stations where servers prepared drinks and garnishes. He watched as Olivia moved efficiently between tables, her professional demeanor firmly back in place, though he noticed she seemed to avoid eye contact with Hargrove whenever possible. Thomas, the head bartender who had worked at Lumiere since its opening, placed a glass of sparkling water with lime before Keanu. After ensuring no other customers needed immediate attention, he leaned slightly across the polished wooden bar. "Good to see you, Mr. Reeves," Thomas said quietly. "Checking in while Chef Mark is away?" Keanu nodded. "Just observing tonight. Place seems to be running smoothly." "Mostly," Thomas agreed, wiping an invisible spot on the bar. Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story. "I couldn't help noticing one of your servers seemed upset earlier." Keanu commented, keeping his voice casual. Thomas glanced around discreetly before responding. "Olivia, she's one of our best, actually. Been here almost from the beginning. Customers love her." "But," Keanu prompted, sensing the unspoken qualification. Thomas hesitated, clearly weighing professional discretion against his evident concern. "Things have been different since Mr. Hargrove took over. The previous manager, Julia, had a more collaborative approach." Keanu nodded, encouraging Thomas to continue. "Olivia's going through some personal challenges," Thomas explained, keeping his voice low. "Her mother was diagnosed with cancer a few months ago. She's been trying to balance caregiving with work and occasionally needs to adjust her schedule for doctor's appointments. Julia was accommodating, but Mr. Hargrove has been less flexible." "I see," Keanu said, his suspicions confirmed. "And today?" "Her mother started a new treatment this morning. Apparently, it was rough. Olivia got a call during her break and was understandably shaken. She stepped away for a moment to compose herself, but Hargrove found her," Keanu finished. Thomas nodded, then straightened as several customers approached the bar. "Just my observation, sir," he said professionally before turning to greet the new arrivals. Keanu sipped his water thoughtfully, watching the dining room with increased attention. He noticed that while Hargrove maintained an impeccable front with customers, greeting regulars by name, ensuring glasses were promptly refilled, overseeing the timing of courses with precision, His interactions with staff carried a subtle undercurrent of condescension. It wasn't overt enough to be immediately apparent, but manifested in small ways. A dismissive gesture when a server asked a question, an unnecessarily public correction of a minor error, a tendency to take credit for smooth operations while quickly assigning blame for any hiccups. As the evening progressed and Keanu enjoyed a simple meal at the bar, he also observed Olivia more closely. Despite her earlier distress, she performed her duties with remarkable grace, remembering customer preferences, offering thoughtful wine pairings, and maintaining genuine warmth in her interactions. Several times, he noticed her checking her phone discreetly during moments between tables, her expression tightening each time before she tucked it away and resumed her professional demeanor. Around 9:30, as the dinner rush began to subside, Keanu noticed Olivia approach Hargrove near the host's stand, speaking in a low voice. Though he couldn't hear the exchange, he could read the body language clearly enough. Olivia making a request, her posture both deferential and urgent. Hargrove responding with a firm head shake and dismissive gesture before walking away, leaving her standing alone, her shoulders momentarily slumping before she composed herself and returned to her section. It was at this moment that Keanu decided to intervene, though not in the way most people might expect. Having spent decades in an industry where ego often overshadowed humanity, he had developed a deep appreciation for the power of listening rather than commanding, of understanding before acting. When Olivia next passed near the bar, Keanu gently raised his hand to catch her attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive gentle resonance that had become familiar to moviegoers worldwide. "Could I trouble you for a moment of your time?" Olivia approached with professional courtesy, though Keanu could see the strain behind her smile. Up close, the evidence of her earlier tears was almost completely erased, save for a slight puffiness around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Of course, sir. How can I help you?" "The salmon was excellent," Keanu said, gesturing to his empty plate, "perfectly cooked." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," Olivia replied. "Would you like to see our dessert menu?" "Actually," Keanu said, lowering his voice slightly, "I wanted to ask if you're all right. I couldn't help overhearing earlier in the service corridor." A flash of embarrassment crossed Olivia's face, followed by resignation. "I apologize for that, sir. It was unprofessional of me to bring personal matters into the workplace." "No apology necessary," Keanu assured her. "We're all human before we're professionals. Sometimes life doesn't respect the boundaries of a work schedule." Something in his tone, the simple acknowledgement of her humanity without judgment, caused Olivia's carefully maintained composure to waver momentarily. She glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot before responding. "Thank you for understanding. It's been a challenging day, but I'm managing." "Your mother's treatment?" Keanu asked gently. Surprise registered on Olivia's face. "How did you—" "The bartender mentioned it," Keanu explained. "I hope that's not overstepping." Olivia shook her head. "It's just, most customers don't." She paused, gathering herself. "Yes, my mother started a new chemotherapy regimen today. The initial response was difficult. I was just asking Mr. Hargrove if I could leave a bit early to check on her, but we're short-staffed tonight." The resignation in her voice suggested this wasn't the first such request that had been denied. Before Keanu could respond, Hargrove appeared beside them, his timing suggesting he'd been monitoring the interaction. "Is everything satisfactory with your meal, Mr. Reeves?" he asked, skillfully inserting himself into the conversation. "Olivia, I'm sure Mr. Reeves wouldn't want to be bothered with personal matters." "Actually," Keanu said calmly, his gaze still on Olivia, "I was just about to suggest that Olivia take the rest of the evening off. I noticed the dining room is quieting down, and family emergencies should take priority." Hargrove's professional smile faltered. "While I appreciate your concern, Mr. Reeves, staffing decisions fall under my purview as manager. We have protocols in place for requesting time off, which need to be followed for the smooth operation of the restaurant." "I understand protocols," Keanu replied, his voice still gentle but carrying a newfound firmness. "I also understand humanity, and as an investor in this establishment, I have a vested interest in ensuring both are honored." The word investor landed with visible impact. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise, while Hargrove's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to realization. "You're an owner of Lumiere?" Olivia asked, connecting the dots between his presence in the service area earlier and his current intervention. Keanu nodded simply. "A silent partner. Marc Bouchard and I established Lumiere together, though he's the culinary genius behind it all." Hargrove immediately shifted into damage control mode. "Mr. Reeves, had I known you had a particular interest in this staff member, I would certainly have—" "I don't have a particular interest in this staff member," Keanu interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "I have a particular interest in how all staff members are treated. When Marc and I created the concept for Lumiere, we agreed that respect for the dignity of every employee would be a foundational principle." He turned back to Olivia. "Please, go check on your mother. Family comes first." "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, genuine gratitude replacing the professional veneer she had maintained throughout the evening. As Olivia went to gather her things, Keanu returned his attention to Hargrove. "I believe we were going to have a conversation about operations once the dinner service slowed down. Now seems like a good time." The small office at the rear of the restaurant was simply furnished. A desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets, and a corkboard covered with schedules, vendor information, and staff notes. Keanu settled into one of the chairs while Hargrove, visibly uncomfortable, took the seat behind the desk. "Mr. Reeves," Hargrove began, his tone calibrated to convey both respect and subtle defensiveness, "I want to assure you that I run this restaurant according to the highest professional standards. What you witnessed was an isolated incident involving a staff member who has been struggling to maintain appropriate boundaries between her personal and professional life." Keanu listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful rather than confrontational. When Hargrove finished, he remained silent for a moment before responding. "Tell me something, Mr. Hargrove. What do you believe makes a restaurant successful?" The question seemed to catch Hargrove off guard. "Efficiency, consistency, attention to detail," he replied without hesitation. "Maintaining high standards and ensuring every customer receives an exceptional experience." Keanu nodded. "Those are all important elements, but they're mechanistic. They describe what a restaurant does, not what it is." "I'm not sure I follow," Hargrove said, a hint of impatience creeping into his voice. "When Marc and I envisioned Lumiere," Keanu explained, "we weren't just thinking about serving good food in an elegant setting. We wanted to create a place where genuine connection happens, between the food and the diner, between the staff and the customers, among the team itself. Those connections can't be manufactured through protocols or enforced through fear." He leaned forward slightly. "I observed the dining room for several hours tonight. Olivia, despite whatever personal struggle she's experiencing, created authentic moments of connection with every table she served. Customers responded to her genuine care. That's not something you can train or demand. It comes from people feeling valued themselves." Hargrove's expression remained skeptical. "With all due respect, Mr. Reeves, maintaining professionalism requires clear boundaries. If we make exceptions for personal circumstances, where do we draw the line?" "That's a fair question," Keanu acknowledged. "But I'd suggest that treating each situation with humanity isn't making an exception. It's establishing a deeper kind of professionalism, one that recognizes we're dealing with human beings, not interchangeable parts in a machine." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I've worked in an industry where people are often reduced to their utility, what they can produce, how they appear, what they can deliver. I've seen firsthand how that approach ultimately depletes the very creativity and spirit that makes the work meaningful." Hargrove shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "So you're suggesting we should simply allow staff to come and go as their personal lives dictate? That's not sustainable in a business setting." "I'm suggesting," Keanu replied, "that there's a balance to be found, one that honors both the needs of the business and the humanity of the people who make that business possible. From what I observed tonight, and from what I've heard from other staff members, that balance has been tilted too far toward rigid expectations at the expense of compassion." He could see Hargrove processing this critique, defenses still high, but perhaps beginning to consider another perspective. Mark selected you for this position because of your experience and attention to detail, Keanu continued. Those qualities are valuable, but they need to be balanced with emotional intelligence and a recognition that the most efficient operation isn't always the most effective in the long run. Are you asking for my resignation? Hargrove asked directly, his tone suggesting he was prepared for this outcome. Keanu shook his head. I'm asking for your reflection, to consider whether your current approach aligns with the values this restaurant was built upon. Mark will be back from New York on Friday. Before then, I'd like you to have conversations with each member of your staff, not to evaluate them, but to listen to them, to understand the challenges they're navigating while working here, and to consider how Lumiere might better support them while still maintaining excellent service. Hargrove looked surprised by this direction. You want me to interview the staff about their concerns? Not interview, Keanu corrected gently. Connect. Listen. There's a difference. Something in Hargrove's expression suggested this approach was entirely foreign to his management philosophy, but he nodded slowly. I'll arrange the conversations before Chef Bouchard returns. Thank you, Keanu said, rising from his chair. I believe you care about this restaurant's success, Mr. Hargrove. I'm simply suggesting that how we define success might need to be expanded beyond efficiency and profit margins. As he prepared to leave, Keanu paused at the door. One more thing. I'd appreciate it if you'd reach out to Olivia tonight to check on her mother's condition and assure her that her job is secure, regardless of what accommodations might be needed during this difficult time. After a moment's hesitation, Hargrove nodded. I'll call her this evening. 3 weeks later, Keanu returned to Lumiere, this time entering through the front door during the early dinner service. The restaurant had a warm, vibrant energy, tables filled with customers engaged in animated conversations, servers moving with relaxed efficiency between the kitchen and dining room, music at the perfect volume to create atmosphere without overwhelming conversation. Mark greeted him at the door with a warm handshake and led him to a quiet corner table. Good to see you, my friend. It's been too long. I was here a few weeks ago while you were in New York, Keanu reminded him as they settled into their seats. Ah, yes, Mark nodded, a knowing smile crossing his face. I heard about your impromptu management consultation. Daniel mentioned you had quite an impact. I hope I didn't overstep, Keanu said, genuinely concerned. It wasn't my intention to undermine his authority. Mark waved away the concern. On the contrary, whatever you said seems to have catalyzed some positive changes. Daniel has been different since I returned, more communicative with the staff, more flexible with scheduling. He's even implemented weekly team meetings where everyone can share ideas for improvement. And Olivia? Keanu asked, glancing around the dining room. She's here tonight, Mark confirmed. Her mother's health has stabilized somewhat, and Daniel worked with her to create a schedule that accommodates the treatment appointments. It's actually inspired a broader conversation about work-life balance for the entire team. As if summoned by their conversation, Olivia appeared at their table, her warm smile now reaching her eyes in a way it hadn't during Keanu's last visit. Good evening, Chef Mark, Mr. Reeves, she greeted them. It's lovely to see you both. How's your mother doing? Keanu asked directly, bypassing the usual pleasantries. Olivia's expression softened. Much better, thank you. The new treatment regimen has been more effective with fewer side effects, and having the flexibility to be present for her appointments has made a world of difference for both of us. I'm glad to hear it, Keanu said sincerely. Actually, Olivia continued, I wanted to thank you for what you did that night, not just for me, but for how it's changed things here. She glanced around the restaurant before continuing. There's a different atmosphere now. People feel seen in a way they didn't before. That's all I could hope for, Keanu replied simply. After Olivia had taken their orders and moved on to another table, Mark leaned forward. You know, when we first discussed creating Lumiere, we talked about the food, the ambiance, the business model, all the tangible elements. But what you recognized that night was something I think we both believed, but hadn't explicitly articulated. That the true heart of a restaurant isn't the cuisine or the decor, but the humanity of the people who bring it to life every day. Keanu nodded, watching as Olivia laughed genuinely at something a customer said, the weight that had been visible in her shoulders 3 weeks ago, now noticeably absent. Across the room, he noticed Hargrove engaged in conversation with one of the newer servers, his posture open and attentive rather than rigid and authoritative. It's easy to create systems that maximize efficiency, Keanu observed. Much harder to create cultures that honor both excellence and compassion. But when you manage to do both, magic happens, Mark finished for him, gesturing to the vibrant scene around them. Customers feel it, staff embody it, it becomes self-sustaining. As the evening progressed, Keanu observed the subtle but significant shifts in how the restaurant operated. There was a fluidity to the service, a genuine warmth in interactions that couldn't be trained or mandated. It emerged organically from people feeling valued and respected in their work. When Daniel Hargrove stopped by their table later in the meal, Keanu was struck by the transformation in his demeanor. The rigid perfectionism had been replaced by a more grounded confidence, one that didn't require constant assertion of authority to feel secure. "Mr. Reeves," Hargrove greeted him, "I wanted to thank you for our conversation last month. It challenged some long-held assumptions I had about effective management." "How so?" Keanu asked, genuinely curious about the man's evolution. "I've always believed that maintaining strict professional boundaries was the key to running a successful establishment," Hargrove explained. "But these past weeks have shown me that acknowledging the humanity in the workplace doesn't undermine professionalism, it enhances it. Our staff retention has improved, customer satisfaction scores are up, and ironically, we're operating more efficiently than before. Because people bring their best selves when they feel their whole selves are welcome," Keanu suggested. Hargrove nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. It's a different kind of professionalism than what I was taught in hospitality management, but I can't argue with the results." After Hargrove moved on to attend to other guests, Mark regarded Keanu with amused admiration. "You know, for someone who prefers to remain a silent partner, you have quite an impact when you do speak up." Keanu shrugged slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply notice when someone is struggling and acknowledge their experience. It costs nothing but attention, yet it can change everything." As they finished their meal, Keanu watched Olivia moving through the restaurant with renewed energy and purpose, her interactions with customers and colleagues alike infused with authentic warmth. The tears he had overheard that rainy evening had led to a transformation that extended far beyond one server's personal circumstances, rippling outward to touch the entire restaurant culture. It was a reminder of something he had learned repeatedly throughout his life and career, that beneath the surface of our professional roles and social masks, we all share the same fundamental needs for dignity, connection, and understanding. And sometimes, the most profound impact comes not from grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but from simply pausing long enough to hear the unspoken struggles behind a moment of vulnerability. As he prepared to leave, Keanu noticed a new addition to the small plaque near the entrance that listed Lumiere's values. Below culinary excellence and exceptional service, a third principle had been added: compassionate community. It was, perhaps, the most fitting testament to what had unfolded from that moment when he had frozen in the corridor, hearing a server's muffled tears and choosing not to walk away.